So, my overall thoughts on motivation is that it's completely overrated. I do know it helps, but here's what I mean by that. When we want to achieve a goal, we have the goal up here, and then we have the certain inputs that we need to do, or the certain actions that we need to do to achieve said goal. There's A plus B equals C. Like, it's a very simple equation. And it's just a matter of doing those things even when you don't feel like it. And that's the hard part. And that's what I understand where people are coming from. Now, so that's just my general take on motivation. However, I do think it is easier, and I understand what people mean, because sometimes you just feel great. You feel like you're in the mood to do all the things that you need to be doing. But really, most of the time, I don't feel like that. And I still do the stuff that I need to be doing. And that's the hard part. And I guess there's a couple ways to think about this. A lot of people online, when they speak about motivation, they only talk about the end goal, the why, the what you are striving towards. That's what people usually talk about when it comes to motivation. And it is strong. I will say that, like, when you think of your why, when you think of your goal, what you're doing it for, whether it's your family or money or cars, whatever it is, like, it does help to have a vision in mind. And that's why it's so commonly talked about. However, what I really wanted to talk about is that there's a complete other flip side of motivation that you can be motivated by. And this is motivation that comes from things that people might deem to be negative. Stuff like despair, anguish, anxiety, that kind of stuff. And a lot of motivation can come from that kind of stuff. And I didn't realize this fully until maybe the past year, when I've gone through a lot of hard stuff. So to give you an example, this past year we went through a real estate recession. And so I'm a real estate investor. I lost a lot of money on these flips. It was a very hard time for me. And during that time, I hit a certain low point. And at that point, I just got so angry. Before I got angry, I first felt very sad, and then I felt kind of hopeless. And then to get out of that, I felt angry. Once I got to that lowest point of hopelessness, I was like, I'm tired of this. And I said, F it, and I just got so angry, and it really helped me escape that little rut. It helped me push out, because all I felt was that feeling of anguish or anxiety, and I was like, I never ever want to feel this low again. I never want to hit this point again. And that's all I was fueled by to escape. I was like, I'm not getting this point again. I don't like it. I don't want to feel this. And it's funny, a lot of higher level entrepreneurs, they use fuel like that, but not a lot of people talk about it. So I think I can illustrate this a little bit better with a study that was done with rats. And I first heard about this study from Jordan Peterson. So here's the study. Essentially, the experimenters, they had rats, and they had rats in a maze. Now, there are different groups of rats. With one group of rat, I guess for all the rats, first they tied a string to the rat to gauge how hard the rat was pulling to gauge motivation. So basically, all these rats had strings tied to them. The rat was placed in the maze, and there was scent of cheese in the first group placed in the maze. And so the rat, based on how fast it was running toward the cheese, they could gauge the rat's motivation based on that measurement. Now, another thing they did was they ignored the cheese, and they said, hey, what if we put cat odor behind the rat to see how fast the rat runs away from the cat odor, because rats do not like cat odor. They are enemies. And they can measure that. And then the other thing they did, this was fascinating actually, was that they combined them. They said, okay, well, what if we have the scent of cheese forward in front of the rat, and what if we had the scent of cat odor behind the rat? How fast or how hard will the rat pull? And what they found was that the rat would pull significantly harder when there was both cat odor behind it and there was cheese in front of it. And what we can take from that as humans is that we can push harder. We will be more motivated when we have something that we're striving towards and something we're running away from. And this is what the story that I just told you about with, like, my low point. I just didn't want to feel that again. I didn't want to feel that low. I didn't want to feel like unlike myself. I never wanted to hit the low point again. And it made me push and escape, because now every time I feel unmotivated to do something, I'll think of that. I'll use that as fuel of like, yeah, no, we're not going back to that kind of pain. Let me just get my work done. Like, I think it's super powerful. And if you haven't gone through that kind of struggle yet, if you haven't gone through that pain as an entrepreneur, or whatever it is, it might happen to you. It probably will, especially if you're pushing forward and forward and forward. And that's okay. Like when the time comes, you might feel like it's the worst thing in the world because it's happening to you and you're like, why would this happen to me? However, just think, hopefully you can think back to this podcast or a YouTube video and think to yourself, okay, like this is just going to help me build the character and help me give me the fuel that I need to continue to go forward and forward and forward and break through new limits. So that was just my experience, and I thought it was fascinating when I heard about that experience or that experiment about rats, because I knew it was true. It was something that I was starting to see for myself in my own personal life, and this wasn't the only time. Like, it's happened when I was younger as well. And I've also heard of other stories from other greats, like maybe the greats in sports like Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant in basketball, if you've never heard of them. But if you ever watch their documentaries or just hear them speak, a lot of times you can hear them using phrases or comments said by other basketball players on the opposing teams, and they were just using these weird phrases as fuel for them to use in that next game against them. And these could be like minor comments about them not having nice shoes or whatever it is, and you can just hear them internalize it completely different than what a normal person, quote unquote, might sound like or might utilize it. Like, they were just using these things to fuel them. And it also made me realize, I'm like, wow, like this is what we do in business, is like we use the fuel of anything that we can, because it's just fuel. Like, it doesn't have to be bad. People think of anger, people think of anxiety, they think of anguish and despair and hopelessness. They think of that as bad. It could be if you feel it and you go through it and you don't utilize it as fuel. But if you actually do utilize that stuff as fuel, it's very, very powerful. So I hope you enjoyed this episode. I hope it was very helpful to you, and I will see you at the next one.